The internet is really dicey this afternoon. Really dicey. So I'm on my backup internet. It doesn't even look like it's going fast enough to live stream. That's concerning. So we're all being taught and trained. Oh, there we go. We're all being taught and trained. Oh, there we go. We're all being taught and trained to accept, internet that only functions a little bit at the time, and electricity that comes and goes, and social services that come and go, and all that other stuff. As our once great republic spirals lower and lower and lower. What a shame. There's so much to talk about. And fam, since they don't teach history in school anymore, they only teach critical race theory and wokeism and all that other stuff. The abomination. And believe me, fam, when any society starts to teach the children abomination and take away their innocence, God does not allow that civilization to go one more past those children. He calls that passing your children through the fire. So all of you that are taking your children to the library to see some monstrosity in a dress twerk their butt in front of your children and all this other mess, God considers you as supposedly the high priest of your house as passing your children through the fire because you're jeopardizing their soul salvation. And what does he say about that? He says, anyone who causes one of these little ones to fall, regardless of who you are now, regardless of who you are, anyone who causes one of these little ones to fall should put a stone around your neck and throw yourself into the sea. Would be better than what God has got waiting for you in judgment. So the reason they're trying to take the children's innocence is they're trying to keep the children from being raptured and taken away when the rapture happens. So they got all these god-awful video games like GTA, where a young person gets hookers in a car and then does all sorts of things and then pushes the hooker out. And if you got one of those video game stations in your house, I'm sorry to tell you, you have an open door right to the pits of hell in your house. And I know you're going to say, oh, Pop. Oh, Pop, but we don't allow our kids to watch this and do that. You're not watching your kids 24/7. I know I'll get a troll that says, oh, we're different. We're the less than 1% of the people that's doing everything perfect. And, you always get a troll who says, You know, it's good that the tail wags the dog instead of the dog wagging the tail. I had somebody who said, when I said you can't get to Florida by going I-95 north, and of course the troll hops on there and they're, smart aleck. Well, you can get to Florida if you take I-95 north to Kennedy Airport and then take a plane down to Florida, And those are the type of people that are going to be short when the stuff hits the fan, because God's trying to talk to their heart. But they're a devil's advocate for every stupid and foolish and perverse and crappy thing. So they're not giving an ear to God. They're giving an ear to the devil to be an advocate for him, and they want to sound clever and avant-garde and condescending, towards believers and all that other stuff. Exactly what God said it would be like in the last and evil days of Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah. And fam, the Russian Orthodox Church has urged their government to first strike the Iron Eagle and wipe us out, because they consider us to be Sodom and Gomorrah. See, in Russia, they don't allow pride parades or any of that stuff. They allow people to practice the abomination, on their own property, in their own bedrooms and stuff. But they do not allow the abomination as far as proselytizing other people or little children. They acknowledge that the abomination exists, but they don't allow proselytizing of the abomination like we do here. And there's one of the African nations, we tried to go over there and twist those people, and they sent us packing. They wouldn't have anything to do with us, We spent billions of dollars in Pakistan trying to teach those people abomination and gender confusion, God says when a nation becomes a borrower instead of the person who lends, that's how you know that you're not under the blessing of God anymore. We've borrowed from everybody we can borrow from, and now the world is turning its back on us because the U.S. paper dollar isn't worth anything. It's nothing more than a promissory note. And when we do these things of taking away another nation's money and pulling the rug out from under them, it's only proving to the rest of the world that our currency is unstable, and we're a banana republic who will take your cash, take your property away from you, knock on your door and kick it in the middle of the night, like that one man, and he thought he was being robbed, so he tried to defend his home, and he wound up with more lead in him than a car battery. They could have gotten him at work and told him they had a warrant for him. They could have knocked on his door, but they waited till 2 a.m. and kicked the man's door in. And the man, of course, went to defend his family because he doesn't know what's going on. And that was all they needed to open fire on the guy and plug him a zillion times, It was a hit. It was nothing more than a hit on the man and his family. Same as that pastor that was taken away, and the wife the wife asked who you are, and they said, well, we already told you. And she said, no, you didn't. And they were like, well, we're not going to tell you again anyway. So, she's like, well, who are you? Where are you taking my husband? What am I going to do as far as getting him out of, the captivity that you're putting him in? Just like a third world country now. If they don't like you politically, you get put on a watch list. Presumably, now everyone who's registered Republican is on a watch list and considered to be more dangerous to the Iron Eagle than Al Qaeda, So if you all think that Orange Man bad, if he by any stretch of the imagination were to get back in office, that they wouldn't cap him, or they wouldn't let Antifa BLM start burning our cities down again, you're naive. And so I believe it's going to be like Oprah Winfrey this time around is going to be president, or Big Mike Obama. I mean, Michelle. I keep forgetting he's got his wig on and everything. So he's Michelle. I keep calling him Big Mike, But see, they know the dimensions of a woman's head compared to the size of her shoulders and everything. And so when you say you're a woman and you've got the wrong chromosomes, and you got 9 inches of kielbasa, down south. I'm a family channel. I'm not going to go into it anymore. They already got the picture of Big Mike in the dress, and he's got 9 inches of kielbasa showing. You don't know what I mean. I'm not going to go into it. And then that actress, that comedian, she outed him and she got capped. But Newsweek already came out with that article, America's first gay president. So I'm sure they don't care. They don't care. But all these people, Bill and Hillary, whenever somebody gets too close and finds out a little bit too much, they end up slumped over in the park, after offing themselves with exactly the same caliber of munition that the other 29 people, off themselves with. And, Big Mike and Barry, their chef, was excellent athletic grade swimmer. And the guy drowned in their backyard. Presumably he knew something. The lady that certified his birth certificate. And they found 9 layers, by the way, on that birth certificate. They found 9 layers where things had been changed. Instead of the thing being written all at one time, originally his birth certificate said African American. But see, 1961, African American was not a category for birth certificate. I remember because I'm from, I'm a boomer generation. I remember way back when a birth certificate said Caucasian, Negro, Mongoloid, or the B word. My brother-in-law's birth certificate had the BAST blah 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 D word in great big letters, 6 inches stamped across his birth certificate. And every place he went looking for a job or had to bring out that birth certificate in this great big stamp that had the B word, So I remember America before it was integrated. I remember going to Glen Echo Park when it was white only. I remember graduating from high school in the early 70s and not being able to attend the prom with my African American girlfriend, who was the most beautiful girl that I'd ever seen, didn't need makeup. She sang opera, and man, she could really belt it out. One teacher said that I would be a great opera singer. Another teacher said that I would be a great psychologist. A third teacher, Miss Lynch, who looked like a doo-doo bug in a dress, she said, oh, he'll be a garbage collector. And so I worked in gas stations as a boy. I worked full time. I went to school, got off at noon from school, walked to the gas station, worked till 10 o'clock at night, 10:30 actually, made $9 a day. Not $9 an hour, $9 a day back then. And men were raising families on that money. And it was very crude compared to the way I was brought up. The men farted and cussed and picked their nose and scratched and spit. All of that stuff that we weren't allowed at my father's house. Because my father would beat you to DEATH if you drank or you cursed. Now, you could drink coffee or you could smoke. And our dining room in the morning looked like a cocktail lounge with a half a foot of smoke up at the top of the ceiling. And my mother used to give me coffee and aspirin for migraines, which was actually suppressed abuse from my father using me like a punching bag or an ashtray. And always amazed me that somebody would think it was normal to come up to your child, take a drag on the cigarette to get it nice and glowing, and then lift up your kid's shirt to crush the cigarette out on the belly of your child like that was the most normal thing in the world. And I slapped his hand away one time, and the cigarette fell on his brand new wool carpet. And he was just shocked at my disobedience. I was like, man, what are you doing? I'm not your ashtray. And it was because I pushed to the front of the family to see his sports car that he bought in 1967, $7,400 sports car, which was more than a Cadillac. A top-of-the-line Cadillac was $6,000. Now, Biarritz was $10,000. So those were handmade and all that other stuff. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a DeVille or a Fleetwood. And this sports car was more than a Cadillac. Worst fight my parents ever had. Dinner wound up on the floor. So his carpet took a beating that night between his cigarette and the cream chip beef winding up on the floor. I hated cream chip beef back then anyway, so my mother made marvelous cream chip beef. So, but in any case, as I worked at the gas station and garbage trucks, I got big and bulky. My father was afraid that someday I would kick his behind. So he put me out at 15 with the shirt on my back. They locked the house up. They went on vacation out of the country for good measure. I didn't have smarts enough to go next door and ask my neighbor, who loved me like a son, if I could rent her basement. So I went out on the street and lived among prostitutes and bisexual men who thought that a young boy, a tender young boy, was just as good as a young girl. Drug addicts and prostitutes and homosexuals, and they teach the young children in school that it's just a couple of guys holding hands or cohabitating a household or that kind of stuff. They don't teach the real deal. They don't teach the what you know about the down low. So, and I see these little children at a pride parade, and I'm talking toddlers, like 4 years old, 5 years old, and they look horrified. You see men there in nothing but a jock strap or a thong with their hairy butts hanging out, hanging on each other, slobbering on each other. And the little children look confused. Some of them will hold their head like to guard their eye from what they're seeing, and they just can't take in what they're taking in. And it's ironic that the word of God says pride goes before the fall. And it talks about 1 hour that the SHTF is going to happen. It's all going to hit the fan. And I believe that it's going to be a literal hour, considering everybody's got their finger on the button. And fam, you got to train. You got to train. You got to go on camping trips and practice living off the land. You have to think to yourself, what am I going to do if that siren were to go off right now? What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Because they've got it now where Hillary spilled the beans. She said we could be hit inside of 4 minutes from start to finish. They have 4 minutes of notice. That was when she made the speech about she was glad that the Council on Foreign Relations was right up the street so that she could get her marching orders from them. Well, why would the Council on Foreign Relations be giving orders to a member of the United States administration? Why? So she let the cat out of the bag. And then recently, Mr. Burns had a meeting with the G7 and he had a G8 in his pants in front of everybody. They said he was bending over to sit in an imaginary chair. Fam, I used to work in the nursing home, and I saw people with dementia sit there and crap themselves right in front of you. You know, they would have somebody come over and play music or have a church service for the nursing home people. And there were a couple that would just sit there and crap themselves, and the room would smell like a cattle train, just like a cattle car, you know, on a hot summer's day, you know. And then they would wrap up the meeting. They would be like, well, that's it, folks, gotta go, you know. It takes real guts to work in a nursing home. Actually, when you work in a nursing home and you're smelling the air with the fecal odor, you know, your body gets used to it until you go home and your family says, look, you got to change and shower before you sit down at the dinner table, you know, that kind of thing. I was changing this guy's bed, and he was in his 70s. And the way you do it is you roll them over and you put the fresh sheets under their butt and everything. Then you roll them the other way. You pull the sheets the other way, make the bed with them in the bed. I rolled the guy over, and he went all over the front of me like a soft serve ice cream machine. And then he said, what's going on? And when he turned, he peed straight up in the air and peed all over my head and face and everything. I didn't have any change of clothes. I had to wipe my uniform down and then go have my lunch, you know. The other grunts at the nursing home, you know, those are the ones that do the actual work that change the beds and clean out the toilets and take care of all the nasty stuff. And then the nurses show up when the family visits. They get all the accolades and praise and everything, and $50 and $100 tips from the family, and flowers and boxes of candy. But the grunts, and I know you trolls are, well, how dare you call people grunts? We called ourselves grunts because we were the ones that did the dirty work while the nurses took all of the credit. So I was out in the hall at this one nursing home, and an Oriental couple lived in this room, and the wife got her wheelchair stuck between the two beds, and the husband stood up to pull the wheelchair back, and he lost his balance, and he went straight down backwards and hit his head on the floor. It sounded like a bowling alley when you throw the ball too high up in the air, and it makes that thock noise, thock, on the floor. And I went in, and it looked like one of those spin art things at the beach where you have the piece of paper that's spinning, and you take the red paint and you splatter the red paint on the paper and it spins. I was like, OMG. So I got a towel out of the bathroom. I tucked it all around his head, and I hit the nurse's bell. She came around the corner. She said, y'all complain too much, you know, even before she knew what was going on. And then she saw the man on the floor, and they told me to get out of the room and not say anything about anything according to, you have to sign a contract which says you're not going to say anything about what you see, what you might see. They did the worst thing. They didn't take the man to the hospital. They wrapped his head and put him in bed, crossed his arms. He passed away in bed about 45 minutes later. They never called the ambulance or anything, you know. And they brought me back in and threatened me with legal issues if I said anything to anybody, you know. So very sad. The guy was a goner anyway. I can tell you that kind of a fall from standing up to straight back, elderly, you know, and then the guy wants to sleep after the fall. That's the worst thing possible. So if they put him in the hospital, they'd have run up a bill. He would have lasted 3 or 4 days and then passed anyway, you know. But just the shame, the disrespect. Another man cried out that he was getting ready to pass. I asked the man, do you want me to pray with you? You know, to comfort the man. And the social lady said, oh, separation of church and state, you can't do that. You'll get us sued, you know. I'm like, well, lady, aren't you all the same people that just let a man who hit his head on the floor pass away? But you're saying I can't pray for this other guy, you know. And fam, nursing homes aren't necessarily abusive. It's just that when they give a dozen or 15 people to one person to clean up after and look after, there's no way you could do that and take reasonable care of people. So you get one nurse who's burning herself out, doing a good job. Then you get the other nurse who's working 2 or 3 jobs, doesn't speak a drop of English, you know. Somebody's medicine doesn't get taken at the right time, you know, and they have a aneurysm or whatever, and then it's all over for them. So most people don't last too long once they go into a nursing home for that reason. And for some reason, they charge this enormous amount of money. Hey, Justin, they charge this enormous amount of money, but they never seem to be able to make it financially. And the shame was the food, the crappy food that the residents got, hot dogs and baked beans. And believe me, you could tell the next day that it didn't agree with the people. But by the same token, they made the excess food go into the trash. They would not let the housekeeping staff eat any of it. And there were times when I was starving my brains out and I had half a sandwich for lunch and the other half a sandwich for my dinner. And the other ladies would push a little plate of rice or blood sausage or plantains, you know. And believe me, when you're that hungry, you don't fuss about what it is. I gobbled that stuff up. And then I had to go to work at Friendly's till 1 o'clock in the morning. And my manager, Tim, would come back to the kitchen and he would say, Will, you know, these people ordered this delicious tuna on Texas toast and coleslaw and fries and a chocolate shake, and they walked out on the order. Would you like to have it? And man, I was like, oh boy, you know, oh boy. he was a good guy. And I worked hard for Friendly's. I always made sure that I bussed the tables so that the wait staff were not handling dirty silverware and plates and then fixing people's food. So I handled all the dirty dishes and set the tables up so the wait staff didn't have to do it, you know. I just did it because it was the right thing to do. And then I would walk home 1 o'clock in the morning and I would turn the knob at my brother's house. Open the door. The dog would go woof one time. Woof. My brother would pound down the stairs. Sound like a snake, you know. Friendly's used to be good. IHOP, you know, Denny's. All of those used to be good. Waffle House was always good for a show at 1 o'clock in the morning. Tasty Diner. I would go when I was a kid, 15 years old, and hang out at Tasty Diner in Bethesda. And there was this hooker named Martha, nice lady. She was a nurse at the local hospital. She had a nurse's uniform on and a mink coat and a Cadillac Biarritz. A Cadillac Biarritz de elegance. And I was at Tasty Diner one morning drinking coffee. And when you're on the street, you stay awake at night. And then daytime, you look for a place to sleep. Nighttime, you want to stay awake so nothing happens to you. So I'm sitting there at Tasty Diner drinking coffee. Martha comes in. She has this spectacular meal with her 2 Johns. And then she stands up and she grabs a $5 bill from one of the Johns and gives it to the old lady behind the counter as a tip. And man, that guy was furious. She got the guy outside. She was smart. She said, unless you want to walk home, you get in the car and shut your mouth. See, most hookers get kicked out of the John's car, but she always had her own car. She did hooking right. And as a matter of fact, I went to my mother's funeral with an escort, very beautiful lady who looked like Helen Crump off of Andy and Mayberry. And she was very aloof and nothing happened between us. She was a shoulder to cry on. I knew she was a hooker, you know, and I wanted my family to assume she was a girlfriend because she was so beautiful. I never told my family she was a hooker. My mother's funeral was a circus. The priest was wearing his black kilts and a green Isaac Lacoste t-shirt, smoking a cigarette when we rolled up. My brother and I were lead pallbearers. He started to laugh hysterically like he was nuts. And I told him, I said, if you don't straighten up, I'm going to slap the crap out of you. You won't be laughing, you know. I said, you get a grip on yourself. And so the funeral was terrible. My mother had walked out of the Catholic Church in 1973 when they preached the lie about a baby being just a clump of cells, and it was okay to scrape it out of the mother's belly like seeds out of a pumpkin and throw it in the trash. My mother walked out of the Catholic Church. So my family paid them for her funeral. The priest didn't even get her name correct. And so we go out to the burial ground, and my mother gets buried across from Kmart in Glenmont. I mean, I could to this day find her burial spot because it's right across from the Kmart sign, you know. So later on, I went back when things calmed down to pay my respects. I stepped near her grave and I sunk all the way up to my knees in dirt, and it terrified me. It terrified me. It was like being in quicksand. I had to sit on the side of the gravesite and take my hands and pull my legs up out of the grave. It terrified me. Never went back after that. Well, I did go back after my father was buried. And yeah. And it poured rain when my father was buried, which people believe that means that you were saved when you passed. If it rains during your burial, it poured when my father was buried. So I went back, and it was a very muggy day. And I got out of the Lincoln in my 3-piece suit, going to go and pay my respects to my folks. And this big old doo-doo fly flies right up my nose and into my sinuses. And I had read a story about a lady who had a fly lay eggs up inside her sinuses. And when they did the autopsy, her part of her brain was eaten away by grubs. That to me was horrifying. So I was at their gravesite going, trying to get the fly out of my sinuses, and hawking, going, hack, hack, hack. And so these people at the next gravesite over thought that was very disrespectful. And they thought that I was getting ready to hawk up a lunger and spit on the grave. And they really gave me a look. So when I got the fly back down into my mouth, big old fly, yeah, I took off running back towards the Lincoln with my tie over my shoulder, running back towards the Lincoln. I threw the door open, got my $4 cup of coffee out of the console. It didn't occur to me to spit the fly on the ground. I spit the fly into the coffee. And then I said to myself, you dumbass, you could have spit the fly onto the ground by the car and then rinsed your mouth out with the coffee. Would have been the smart thing to do. But man, I was right over to the discount store to get a $1.59 bottle of peroxide, because peroxide will kill anything. So I took that $1.59 bottle of peroxide and gargled with it several times and spit that out. But never went back to my parents' grave after that. It was like they had a keep away sign for me. But my father got born again 3 years before he passed, which is very unusual for somebody to get born again when they're 77. And he went from being my tormentor to being my best friend and confidant and pal. And I would take him to O'Donnell's or Bish Thompson's or it was called Blue Hawaii or Thunderbird or something. It was a Polynesian restaurant. And he would say, "How are things going, son?" I'd say, "Fine, Dad, fine." "You?" "Good, son, good." Then he would get on the phone and tell my sister how he and I had this fabulous conversation. And all it ever was fine, fine, good, good. And he would get up to walk into the kitchen to go to the bathroom. I'd have to go get him and do a Joe Biden and say, "Pops, you don't urinate in the kitchen. I got to take you to the men's room, and then then you can urinate. You don't urinate in the restaurant kitchen." And then I put him in the car, and I think I used to be so afraid of this man. God gave me the privilege to be with him at his passing, patting his hand, telling him how much I loved him, which was very difficult at the time because I hadn't reconciled all the abuse. And fam, forgiving somebody is not for their benefit, it's for your benefit. It takes all of the bags off of your shoulders. It's marvelous. So, I was there with my dad. He passed 11:38 at night. I was patting his hand, telling him I loved him. And swooped through the window came angels or whatever, collected his soul, passed right through me. And for a second, we were all one. I can't describe it any other way. Then whoosh out the window, Buck and his angel pals. I called my family. I said, 11:38, Buck just passed. And on the other end of the phone, I heard, "Thank you," click. "No, gee, Will, would you like to come and stay in your old bedroom since the house is 2 blocks up from the hospital? Maybe it wouldn't be a good idea for you to drive." But those angels and stuff passing through me had calmed me and gave me a sense of assurance that Buck was on his way to heaven. So I popped open the top of my Coca-Cola and opened up my little bag of cheese crackers and made the 1.5-hour drive back home in the Lincoln. So actually it wasn't a Lincoln, it was a Mercury X100 Marquis. Mercury Marquis X100 with a sports roof. Oh gosh. And it was gold. And I came over Goody Drive in Rockville, 8:30 in the morning, driving into the sun, and another young man with a gold Mustang or something like that. Between the 2 gold cars and the gold sun, we didn't see each other, and the young man T-boned the Mercury and almost cut it in half. So I had that car for a literal number of weeks. And then I had to buy another car. I had to buy another car after that. I think I bought a Ford LTD. I don't remember. I'll never understand why I didn't. I gotta check my medicine. I'll never understand why I did not buy a van with a bed in the back of it. So it's 4:30. Gosh. 1, 2, 3, 4:30. Oh, goodness. Ah, I got to check my blood pressure, fam. I got to check my oxygen level. See, when I do a video, it makes my oxygen go down. So I get out the old pulse oximeter and see how my pulse and everything is doing. 70 beats per minute, 97% saturation. That's great. It's great for somebody my age. The shake is called Parkinsonian syndrome. And it comes on it comes on people who are genetically predisposed to it at about the age of 50. So I've been dealing with it for a long time. My sister shakes like she needs a tune-up. It pretty much runs in the family. So, I'll see what my blood pressure is. Oh, gosh. (125/81). Do you realize how spectacular that is for a 70-year-old man? 125/81, 64 beats per minute. Can't get better than that. I'll tell you one thing that will give you a long life is when you realize there's certain things you can't do anything about. Like, thanks, Justin. When you realize there's certain things you can't do anything about, like when my little boy got run over by our own car. My girlfriend ran him over 2 times, forward and backward. She didn't realize he was under the car. So, still remember it like it was yesterday. I know when that day comes, now I'm going to cry. I know when that day comes that he'll run up to meet me. Oh, okay. All right, Justin, you have a good night. I know when the time comes, he'll run up and meet me. Oh, gosh. And that will be the meeting in the air. So, all the various phones are for my YouTube channels because YouTube requires you to have a different phone number for each channel. So what I do, I just buy a new track phone each year, and track phone comes with a year's worth of service. So if you buy a Moto G Power or a Stylus for $50, they come in packs of 2. And you buy a Moto G or Stylus, and yeah, you get a whole year for $50. You can't beat that. And see, it seems a little wasteful to throw a phone away. You know, I used to give them away, except for the fact that after you do a factory reset, it does not erase the phone number that the phone used to have, and that can be scavenged to get your personal information if the person is clever. So I learned that in this day and age, you'd like to do things for people, but a lot of times you just can't because it brings you more trouble. I mean, when I worked at the Dodge dealership, a lady was having a problem, and it was a problem where she didn't want to be on the inside phones telling her business. So I gave her a brand new phone in the box. I said, you know, get it turned on. It's got minutes. Go ahead and knock yourself out. And she said, this is for me. And I was like, yeah, my father taught me a great thing. You buy certain things on sale, and that way you can always gift them later on. My father always wanted one of those clear phones that you can see the guts on the inside. And so I bought him the phone, and he passed away before I could give it to him. So I don't know what happened to the phone. I had it for a while because it used to remind me of my father. My grandfather had an interesting passing too. He had a 1954 Philco TV set. I used to go over to his apartment and watch Lawrence Welk with him. My father hated my grandfather. I'm named after my grandfather. I adored my grandfather. He was always good to me, you know. He held my hand one day and he said, William, you're going to be an accountant someday. Huh. I wound up being a garbage collector. But he always gave me credit for being smart. And one cool thing he did to retaliate against my father, which was very common a half century ago, you bought a young boy their first rifle. And so 11 years old was quite the year for me. My cat died. My sister tried to stab me in the kitchen. My father knocked me down the basement stairs and almost beat me to DEATH. And my grandfather, Harold, gave me a rifle. And my father was fit to be tied, you know. But the interesting thing was, my father would clean the rifle, point it at the ceiling below my room. And so when I noticed he was cleaning the rifle, I was very quiet, staying off to the side of my room so that if my father accidentally discharged the rifle, I wouldn't wind up with a piece of lead in my ass. So, because he was always like, get the lead out of your ass. So that kind of stuck in my mind. But my parents had a falling out when they got older. They found out they weren't the nice people that they thought they were. They couldn't stand each other towards the end. They were having money trouble. I offered to move back in. I said, I will move back in and I will pay you a handsome sum of rent each month to help you out. My mother was like, no, no. You know, like I was Donald Trump or something. No, you know. And I had given her a car, you know. My father took her car away. I gave her a nice car. It wasn't a new car, but it was a nice car. It was an ex-detective's car. It was a Ford Interceptor. The back said Interceptor on it, you know, like you not getting away from us. I don't think I ever got a thank you, kiss my ass, or go to hell, you know. Huh. You're from different worlds, but some reason you stay because your guts told you to stay healthy. Yeah, okay. Allison, I just showed my blood pressure and everything is perfect. I'm fasting right at the moment, which means I'll eat a cracker. I'll eat a cracker every so often to keep from fainting. But I'm fasting. Fasting kills off cancer. It lowers your blood pressure. It helps your focus. You have to be careful doing it at my age, being as I'm the better part of a century old. But, you know, I've got the mind of a 20-year-old. So, yeah, I'm fine. The good Lord has helped me through all of these god-awful trials lately. But, and I have people that love me and care about me, you know. I have people that love me and care about me. So my newfound family, hey, Brittany, thanks again for the disposables. My closest relatives live in this 5,000 square foot McMansion. And 11 or 12 years ago, I got kicked out of my home of 11 years. And I appreciate that. I pray for everybody also. But I went through a year and a half of homelessness. I went over to say hi to my relatives in the McMansion, the 5,000 square foot home that they rightfully deserve. I'm not saying they don't deserve it. And she told me that I was going to be her sound manager for her new ministry, and we were going to blanket the world with the gospel. And because I used to go down to Washington and give out food to the homeless on DuPont Circle with Pastor Chris, my buddy Chuck. And I would stand there and just sing full blast, sing and pass out food and have a high old time. And I've known what homelessness is all about. Horrible not to have any place to go, not to be wanted. So my sister gave me this Who Struck John and BS about I was going to be her international ministry sound manager and all that other crap. And I went to their McMansion, and I think it was around Christmas time. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But they gave me this little camper blanket, 40-inch by 60-inch camper blanket. So when you pull it up here, your feet are cold. When you try and cover your feet, you're cold up here. And they gave me a Godspeed and be warm and safe and dry, and and the elephant in the room was like, don't ask to stay in our 1,500 square foot basement, because you got 5,000 square foot home, 5 Christmas trees in the home, 5 Christmas trees, and 2 people living there. My brother-in-law hates my guts. He doesn't say it, but I know he hates my guts. And last time I was there, he was talking to me, and he was expressing his dog's anal gland. Not to be crude, you can look it up for yourself. He had the dog in the opposite direction on his chest, and he was expressing the dog's anal gland, and then asking me if I was going to stay for dinner. I was so grossed out, I was so grossed out. I think I just got up a few minutes after that and left. And I would go over there to try and say hi to my family, drive for an hour and a half over the mountain and everything. And my one sister always took the conversation to Code Browns at the hospital. I'm not going to go into what a Code Brown is. She always talked about Code Browns and how she had raised this colony of cockroaches, and she could communicate with the cockroaches telepathically. And this woman is very eclectic, very brilliant, very brilliant. She knew years ago that the earth was all one landmass with no computer or anything. She said if you juggle the continents around, there was one time when they all fit together. People didn't used to think that back then, although the Bible intimates that the earth was all one landmass. But she had figured it out with no computers. But in any case, she raised these cockroaches, the real nasty ones that look like armadillos with 2 antennas coming out their butt. I mean, the real nasty ones. that you don't even want to squish because they're so nasty. And so she had a box of these things on her dining room table, and the maintenance guy came in to do maintenance on her apartment. He said, Mrs. So-and-so, are you aware that you have a box of cockroaches on your dining room table? And we're paying thousands of dollars to eradicate the things, in the building complex, that kind of thing. And she was like, oh, these are my pets. I can communicate with them telepathically. They're really quite smart. And wouldn't you know it, she had to find a new apartment. She actually wound up in an institution for a while. And then she had to find a new apartment. My relatives, I don't say family, I say relatives, took her under their wing. My brother, when I was living with him, unbeknownst to me and the family, was charging me rent. I paid my brother $5,600 of rent to stay in his hell house for a year. And he did not tell the family, my relatives, that I was paying him anything, so they paid him rent. What a dirty so-and-so to do that to your own family. I haven't talked to him in 20 years. And when I called the bank after I had the accident, I called the bank and I said, I can't physically drive the car anymore. I got to turn it back in. It's always best to do a voluntary repossession on your credit score rather than having them track you down. Involuntary is a 7, voluntary is an 8. Voluntary is much better because it shows you mean well and that they're going to get the car back in one piece without it being destroyed. And so when I was taking the plates off in the hot sun, this shadow came up behind me, and he said, it was my brother. He said, well, you're getting ready to DIE and they're taking your car. Where's your God now, a-hole? He didn't say a-hole. He said the whole thing. Where's your God now? And I turned to him. I said, my God can heal me. My God can restore me. He can give me another car and another place to stay. And that's exactly what God did. I was in the basement of Hell House in the corner, quietly praying. My brother came and he smacked my hands apart. Don't do that in my house. Well, his old lady threw him out, so it didn't turn out to be his house because the wife had all the credit. He didn't have a squat. He didn't have squat. I pray each day for his soul's salvation, but the word pretty much says when you've had the light and then you shun the light, that there's no other thing that God can do for you. Sorry. So any case, I use the word of God to pray with. Just like Jesus did when he was in the desert being tempted of the devil. You want to speak the word of God. By his stripes I am healed. He shall deliver me from the noisome pestilence and the snare of the fowler. It says in the word of God, we're surrounded by a cloud of witnesses that are in the same time, but a different dimension. So you never want to have a running conversation with the devil. But when the devil is doing stuff to you, you want to thank Father God. You say, Lord, I thank you that by your stripes I am healed. And you want to bring into remembrance the names of God. Lord, I thank you that you're Jehovah Jireh, my provider. You're Jehovah Rapha, my healer. You're Jehovah Tiskanu, my righteousness. You're Jehovah Nisi, my banner of victory that goes before me in battle. You're Jehovah Shalom, my peace. You're Jehovah Shiloh, the peacekeeper. You're El Elyon, the Most High God. All of that. All of that. So that's how you ward off the attacks of the enemy. Speaking of warding off attacks of the enemy, I got to go, fam. I got to go and eat something. I'm getting the warning messages pretty strong now. But Brittany, I appreciate what you did so much. Justin, thank you for your support. Matt Lyons, thank you for the TENS unit. Terry and Katrina, thank you. Jonathan Brown, thank you. Muhammad, Dibble Craftian, a bunch of you guys. I thank you, and I pray for you every day that God will bless you physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially. I'm outie.